Bruins Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play, just $5. And we're presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms, they apply. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That's Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. This morning, I don't know why it took me forever to see that tweet about Matthew Tkachuk just dummying Semyon Varlamov in front of the net. And my first thought, I don't know how the rest of the play turned out. Looked like Scott Mayfield and some of those Islanders guys were kind of on top of Tkachuk. But I tweeted this out. I was like, I think Tim Thomas would have pulled a gun on Matthew Tkachuk. That would have been would have broke his brain. He would have went nuts on Matthew Tkachuk, and it would have been awesome to watch. But that was my first thought, was someone like Tim Thomas would just lose his mind at a guy like Matthew Tkachuk on that play.
I think Jeremy Swayman would be pumped because he's finally, I can get into a fight. I'm going to slash the shit out of his knee. They're right in the back of his leg, and do that and cause a fight. Swayman would probably be excited that it finally happened. So yeah, again, the Panthers and Matthew Tkachuk are very good at what they do of getting under your skin, but you got to call one of those things.
They must have dirt on the NHL, because how does none of that get called?
I give full credit to the Panthers of how good they are at being the fly in the ointment, getting teams to lose their minds, those things. But what factors into that as to why teams lose their minds is they get away with that shit, and then you start chasing them instead of the play, and then it all goes downhill, and then they strike on the I can see the Panthers are very good at what they do, but you can see why that breaks the brains of some of these opposing teams when things like that aren't getting called. It's funny how Brazeau moves a stick a centimeter on that goalie interference call that was taken back 2 weeks ago. But then you have Tkachuk just straight cross-checking Varlamov right in the face, and nothing happens off of that. It's, again, not trying to be too much of a complainer here about Tkachuk and the Panthers, but you got to call at least one of those things. You got to step in once in a while. You can let them toe the line, all those things, but at some point, give him 2 minutes. It's not saying you got to kick him out of the game. Give him 2 minutes. You can't do that the entire time.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, even after the goal, kind of as he goes by Varlamov, sort of punches him in the head, which is classic Matthew Tkachuk. And I mean, I agree. We always get on the Bruins for being undisciplined against the Panthers and sort of losing their minds. But the team knocked me out of the playoffs 2 straight years, just doing shit like that, punching, my captain in the face. I'd probably lose my mind a little bit on him. I probably would, sort of be unhinged. But yeah, they're good at that. They have perfected sort of just towing that line. And I don't know why they get away with so much of it. Obviously, the punch on Marchand from Bennett, I don't think any of us saw that in the moment. That had to be, I think that came out just through Twitter, right? Because in the moment it was oh, I don't really know what that was.
It was only off of the other angle. I think you could really see it. It was there's a Zapruder film at first. You didn't really know what exactly was happening. Then I think it was right before, what was it? Game 4, I want to say. It was right an hour before puck drop, the other angle dropped. And it was ooh. All right. Because I think it was right after, it was after it was already announced that there was going to be no additional discipline or something for Bennett. So there's a whole to-do there in terms of how that played out.
And they were oh, hey, here's this angle. It should support our decision for no supplemental discipline, right? Easy.
You punch him in the face.
So anyway, that's our little Panthers minute. Bruins, though, they get a big win Saturday, 4-3 overtime win over the Leafs on Friday. Diver and I did a Bruins beat where we kind of talked through the whole idea of, is Jim Montgomery on the hot seat? And I think it was a valid thing to talk about. Neither of us really said yes or no to him being fired. It was sort of just kind of running through the whole situation, evaluating all angles. Because again, and I stand by this, good teams don't impulsively fire a coach. Great teams don't, fire a coach who's been highly successful in the regular season. Although I will say, I'm watching that the Comeback on Netflix, and by God, Grady Little seems like a complete idiot. At least the documentary paints him that way.
I watched the first episode, so it made me very sad where it ends on a traumatic moment in young Connor's life, Game 7 of the 03
Can
ALCS.
imagine. Can
But I'm like
imagine.
watching, I'm like, how much money do they give Grady Little to do this? Because it's pretty much them just sit him down there and be like, yeah, you really fucked this up, didn't you? And it's like Theo being like trashing him. I was like, how did they get him for this? They went
they
there
even got
with the
Henry.
sole purpose of like just destroying him.
They even
It
got
was
John
warranted,
Henry.
but
Yeah, they got John Henry not only to do an interview for this, but also to say on the record in that moment, he said, "Can we fire? Do we have to wait till the end of the game to fire him?" Like,
yeah.
it was just. It's a great documentary, by the way, for those who want to watch a good documentary. I highly recommend it. But I don't think that it's good for organizations to just be like, "Oh, you had 3 straight bad games. Goodbye, Jim." But we kind of talked through all that. Obviously, though, a big win on a Saturday night against your chief rival or one of your chief rivals in the Leafs definitely cools the seat down, I think. Good 60-minute effort, albeit for that kind of last goal that Matthews scored there at the end. What do you think this does for the Bruins in general, just getting that win?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was much needed, right? As you said, it's unfortunate that you have that brutal miscommunication right at the end of the game because for most of that game, it felt like a really professional, solid win. Like, again, I don't think it's few and far between for any team to have a 60-minute effort, but I think you saw consistent puck pressure, sustained ozone time for most of that third period. Like, they were really limiting the high danger chances. Like, looked like a professional closeout kind of game, right? Like a lot to be encouraged by. You have, again, like your bottom 6 contributing. And again, like by no means was it perfect, right? We can run through a whole list if we wanted to of things you have to get better. But I think as a whole, like the urgency was finally there, which I think has been lacking a little bit during this recent rut that they've had. So yeah, I think as a whole, it's a step in the right direction. It's all about how you build off of it, right? Like you've got a Flyers team on Tuesday that's kind of fighting through it as well. Like you're able to hopefully stack some positive games together here before you go down to Carolina. And again, like you just look at the way they played. I think that was the biggest thing. Like they were moving their feet. They didn't take a billion penalties like these previous games, right? Which is a step in the right direction. But I just think the urgency, the puck pressure, putting opposing defenses under duress, forcing turnovers. Not anything too crazy in terms of how they approach the game, but the results kind of speak for themselves, and it's just off of playing simple, motivated hockey. And I think you finally saw that, which I think at this point, without getting too far ahead of yourselves, that's all you're looking for right now. Like this team is not going to be a finished product. No team is on October 26th when that game was played. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of new additions to this team. So it's going to take a while for them to really be a well-oiled machine. So when you have these stretches here where the puck's not going in the net, you're not generating a lot, it's all about just playing simple hockey. And I think you saw that, and that was a step in the right direction for this team on Saturday night.
Yeah, you're not going to clean up every issue in one game. I don't care if you win 7-0. There's still issues there. And I agree with you. I think Saturday was a great step in the right direction. This just shows Toronto's still Toronto. Like Matthews scores that winner, or not the winner, the game tying goal late in the third. They're getting behind the Bruins D. And then just in overtime, getting forced by a great play by Marchand on the forecheck to force Matthews to have to dish that puck off. And I think he was trying to get it to Marner because he thought Marner was coming back for it, and Marner instead went right to the bench. And it's just the same problems that plague them. And I know it's October and there's a long way until April and May, but it is incredible to watch them just shoot themselves in the foot in the biggest moments. And they've been doing it now forever. There's a story in The Athletic, I think today or Monday, on sort of the, like, they sort of compared being a Leafs fan with being a Cubs fan for all those years. Like, and it's staggering, but it's sort of true. Like when the Leafs do finally break through, which again, they will at some point, it will happen. I'm sorry, Bruins fans. Like it will happen at some point. They've come very close, at least to getting past the Bruins. It will be very satisfying for their fans. I mean, that is going to be an incredible feeling for them. But God, like that, just the turnover to no one and Marner going to the bench. It's like, my God, like still the same thing. And I know they've had issues. They've had issues too. they've had issues
Yeah,
through the first month.
it's always like the same thing too. Where it's just like one play that burns them, right? Because I even think like the team that they have out there is taking steps in the right direction. Like I think Stolarz is like actually a pretty solid goalie that could have a pretty good season. You like what you saw from Joseph Wall last year, and then he seems like he's got these injury issues to watch out for. But like they at least have goalies in place that like could have more to give there. I'm not saying these guys are also going to be on the Vezina watch, but you got that. You get like guys like Chris Tanev. Some of their D have been better than they were in the years past. You've got supporting cast like Matthew Nyes. I feel like Matthew Nyes is going to be the new
He's a
like
great player.
Yeah, and I feel like he's going to be the new Hyman too, where he's just going to go between here or like Edmonton and just be a 40 goal guy. Like I think he's a good player, but also like he knows what he needs to do on lines with some of these star players to be in the right spots to cash in. So like they've got a good supporting cast. They've got the star talent. Just feels like it's always like the one missed read or something like that always comes back to bite them. So they're a team that also is kind of in this tough sledding, but maybe they're also in kind of the same boat as the Bruins, where you bring in Berube, you're trying to, I think, change your identity. And I don't know if they have the personnel to match what they're trying to do in terms of being maybe a tougher opponent, but I think they're probably in that same feeling out process as the Bruins, where it's you're trying to make a little bit of a sea change here, and we'll kind of see again where they are once we get to April as well.
Yeah, I mean, they have new coaching. They have a new coaching staff. The Bruins had a lot of roster turnover in the last 2 years. I agree. I think that's an apt comparison. Another one, fourth line.
They're both going to be in the playoff. They're both going to be in the first round once again.
Yes.
Like, where do we get?
Yes. I fully expect it. Fourth line though, cashes in again. Beautiful assist from Johnny Beecher. Kastelic out in front. So this line continues to produce. They'd been a little slow, or they weren't producing at the same level that they were before against Nashville and Dallas, but they keep it going against Toronto, which is very, very good. Biggest thing, though, for me was Brad Marchand. I want to get to Brad Marchand. First, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. It's hard not to pick more receiving yards for Justin Jefferson or more passing yards for Josh Allen. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Now, back to the show. So Brad Marchand finally, monkey off the back, scores the OT winner. Gets robbed on the first chance, by the way. Completely robbed by Stolarz. It's like, God, this is happening again. Because he's had some legitimate chances. I know he has not been their best player or even close to their best player or even close to what sort of his best case scenario is through the first bunch of games. But there have been chances to score goals. He's been robbed a fair amount, robbed on that play, stuck with it, scores after, a nice forecheck. I found it very telling that his goal celebration was just slamming his stick on the ice, because that has to be the best feeling of thank God I finally it's done. I think it's really important that he scored that. You get him going. You give him a little more confidence. I know after the game he said, he doesn't really think about that goalless drought stuff, but I mean, come on. Gets on everybody. And again, you need more from him. You have needed more from him. He's in your, he's on your top line. He's in your top 6. I think Saturday again, a step in the right direction for him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as you said, he towed the company line, right? Of, I don't really get too worried about these goal droughts, but I think he also relented later on and said good to finally get one. Because I think it wasn't just important for him, it's for the team, right? Because if they, after playing probably their best start to finish game, I would probably say maybe since the Colorado game. Having 2 points right there and then to potentially lose that game in overtime would have been maybe not a backbreaker, but just another step back.
Pretty
for a team
demoralizing.
a team that is in desperate need of good news. So I think it was key for him to get on the board there. And, you just hope it starts building a little bit of momentum there. You look at like that second line with him and Coyle. We're still going into the 9th game for the Bruins. And I think those two still have 0 goals and 1 assist at 5-on-5 play. Like, got to get them rolling. Like, as we said, it doesn't need to be all of a sudden this team's averaging 7 goals the next 2 weeks and everyone's firing off. But you just need one more guy in a top 6 spot there to get on a roll and at least shoulder some of that scoring burden. Like this team needs a 2-goal game from a Pasternak, or they need a Brezzo to keep up what he's been doing or something like that. You just need a few other guys to pull on the rope right now as you're trying to get your footing. And hopefully a Philly team that has a lot of skill. Mitchkov has been unreal for them. Who could have seen that coming? But that is a team with some defensive deficiencies that you hope that, if a guy like Marchand can build off of that and get another goal, or Coyle or someone like that, or even a guy like Morgan Geekie, who Jim Montgomery today was very short. Scott McLaughlin of EEI asked him, what does Geekie have to do to get better? And he says, play better. I was like, oh,
I saw that. That was great.
I was like, oh God. But this is a time now where, you look at how much a guy like Marchand can provide a lift for this team, especially at 5-on-5 play, just scoring in general. You do hope that Tuesday or Saturday's game rather is kind of that jumping off point for him, and he kind of builds on it. Not expecting him to be what he was a few years ago, but I still think he has the skill and the means to be like a 60-point regular guy in the NHL, right?
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing I think with him, where it's like I think fans have to understand that he's not the same 80-point guy. He's not going to be lighting it up, but if you can get that 55, 60-point range, like if you can get that, that's going to be valuable, and that's going to be valuable playing next to guys like Lindholm or Coyle. But again, as you're right, Coyle does need to get going, and Philly is a perfect spot for sort of guys like that to get going. Brazeau is getting his feet under him. He has goals in 2 straight games. Again, around the net front, like that's where he makes his money. That's where he's going to make his money, and I think he's another candidate for sort of top 6 minutes. Like maybe that's your internal fix. Because I want to talk about Tyler Johnson, but there's another thing I want to talk about, which is the future of Brad Marchand. It was brought up after Saturday's game. But first, quick word from our friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like watching an NBA or NHL game live. The energy in the building, the sounds on the ice or the court, the memories you make with family, friends, and other fans. It's unmatched. And the coolest part is when strangers sitting around you become your best friends. You can make these memories with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. When I use Game Time, I also love the flash deals, which help me get discounted prices on really good seats. Plus, who doesn't love seat views, which give a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy? So, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Now, back to the show. So on Saturday, Elliot Friedman brought up the fact that the Bruins and Brad Marchand were close on a 3-year contract extension. Obviously, Marchand's contract runs out at the end of this year. And Marchand was asked after the game and shot it down, to say the least. Poor Elliot Friedman. He threw Elliot directly under the bus and drove over him, and saying that it's false. It's not true. Not going to talk about the contract situation. And by the way, the reporting was false. Screw you, Elliot. So that
while
was
also saying that he doesn't like talking about contract through the media, but then once again reaffirmed that Elliot Friedman was wrong.
Yes, he doesn't like talking about contracts through the media, but by doing so, talked about contracts in the media. I think it brings up an interesting point. Obviously, like Elliot is very tapped in. my whole thing, and like I know you agree with me on this, like I fully expected like Monday morning or at some point this week for that news to drop of like 3-year contract extension for Marchand. And it'll be like Elliott to break it too, which will be great.
I thought it was going to be like he signed a 3-year and 1-day contract, like just so you could be like Freeman was no, he's not right, but it was a 3-year one. Like I was fully expecting something like that.
The 1 day for the retirement the next year.
Yes, exactly.
I that would actually be like the most Brad Marchand thing to possibly do. It does bring up an interesting point though of, obviously Marchand has struggled a bit through the first bunch of games. As we talked about, got his first goal on Saturday night. And, I saw a little bit of this on Twitter of, if it was a 3-year extension, would you want him for another 3 years? And to me, and we've talked about Marchand's regression, and he's going to be 37 in May. Had 3 off-season surgeries, had double hip surgery 2 years ago. Like he's not the same guy that Bruins had a couple years ago. But like if you did 3 years at a good number, like I'm fine with that. I mean, he's your captain. I think we all understand that he's not going to be that best left wing in hockey guy. That if in year 3 of that contract, which I think he'll be like 39 or 40, if he's a 4th line left wing, like you take it. It just comes down to like, how much does his game break down over those 3 years, and what are you paying him? Because you're already kind of getting a deal on him. I doubt that he would be like, I want to be fairly compensated. I want to make more money than I should this time around. But I do think you have to consider those things in that whole debate.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the biggest question is going to be just what the payout is, right? Because I think over 3 years, as you said, like even if he regresses, right, and becomes maybe more of like a third line kind of player, I think he can still help out your team. You look at the energy he brings, how good he is defensively, like he could morph into a really, really good bottom 6 guy if we get to the final year of that contract. I'm sure Brad Marchand doesn't want to hear about that, of thinking that he's going to be like a more of a Swiss Army knife kind of player. But like you can see where, if that is the path that just his career kind of goes in, how he can still be a really useful player, even if maybe he's a 20 goal, 20 assist, 2-way penalty kill kind of guy. He'll help out this team over I think the span of that deal, barring injury or anything like that. But it's going to come down to just what the money is, right? Like, is he going to take a page out of Bergeron and Chara's book, which you think over a 3-year deal, he's not going to just lock himself into that, right? Like
$1 million a year.
Yeah. But are you looking for like a $6 million, like maybe a slight decrease, but still like pretty solid for a guy that, has obviously done a lot for this team? Are you looking at it being prorated of it being like $3 million, which I think is probably more manageable in terms of just where the cap is going? And again, this is a guy that has been on a bargain deal for most of his career, like 6.25 for what he's given you for the last, 7+ years is very, very impressive. But I think that's the biggest question mark, is just what that money comes out to. Maybe that's why this could take a while for them to come to terms on a deal, just in terms of what he's looking for, what the team is looking for. Again, famous last words after the entire Swayman fiasco. I can't imagine this being something that becomes contentious, but it is fascinating to see just what that final payout is going to be. Because this is a guy that wants to be here, wants to keep on playing. He's made that abundantly clear, especially with the Olympics around the corner. He's motivated to play at a high level, not just for the Bruins, but also because he wants to make a legitimate run at the Canadian team for the Olympics. Like, he wants to be on that line with Crosby and McKinnon, but he also has to play to level deserving, because Canada doesn't have a lot of goalies, but they've got a whole lot of really skilled forwards. So this is a guy that's very motivated, obviously, to get to that stage, to keep up that level with the Bruins. So I'm not worried about the value per se, or the concerns about a 3-year deal. It's just what the money's. I'm more just curious, I would say, as to what that contract is going to look like. If it is indeed 3 years and 1 day, whatever it ends up being.
My concern with it is not so much him, and it's not so much the money, because again, the money will be reasonable. He's not going to be asking for 7 or 6.25. I think it's going to come in somewhere around the 5 range or something like that. It's more so like, as I kind of said, moving back in the lineup as he moves, whether it's staying in the second line, moving to the third line, potentially around year 2 or 3. Do the Bruins have the guys to replace him in the top 6. Like that is, to me, that's the big thing because, again, you can make an argument now he's more of a middle 6 forward than a top line guy, which is fine. Like he's still going to produce this year, he's still going to put in 60 something points. But next year, the year after, and then the year after that, as he gets older, and again, a lot can change. They can draft well, they can make a trade to bolster the top 6, free agency, however it is. But just looking at the game board now, you don't have anyone in Providence outside of Fabian Lysell, and he's a right wing, to be a top line or projects to be a high end left winger. Like is Zacha that? I would say Zacha fits more of Marchand's mold of like a 60-point guy, which is fine. Like again, but that's the whole thing is like, how are you replacing his production? Because Jake DeBrusk left in the offseason. So like DeBrusk is gone. Do you at this deadline, do you trade a first for a left wing with a ton of term, like that you can lock up for a while that's young? I don't know who that is yet, but like that's my thing is like who replaces that production in the top 6? Because again, I think everybody wants to see Marchand hoist the cup at least one more time. I mean, I think that's fitting. Captain Marchand hoisting the cup would be awesome for the league, piss everybody off. Bruins fans would love it. Like it would just, the whole thing of that would be great. But I that's my big thing is who's replacing that production in the top 6. And we don't know that now. We're not going to know that now. But I'm just curious, like what their plan is to actually get that in these next couple of years. So
yeah,
and
couldn't tell you, Evan. To be honest,
I was going to say, I was
not passing the ball to me because I'm like the guy in like the 5th row in like the NBA game who's not paying attention, and the ball hits me as I'm like, eating popcorn in the head. Like, 'cause I couldn't tell you as to what the exact plan is. It's gonna either someone's gonna have to take off like within the system, or it's going to have to be again whether it's I don't know if it's a trade this year, but monitoring that or what the free agent market looks like. But yeah, like in terms of just scoring on the wing, it's something where the Bruins had plenty of options forever in terms of just between Marchand and DeBrusk and everyone like that, where you're like, all right, they've got enough guys, we'll see where it fits. But now you've got to rebuild your center depth, obviously, and you got Lindholm, you've got Patra, you've got guys in place, and it's better than where it was. And you have Letourneau, down at BC, so you've got options
Higgins.
There. Yeah, of course, yes, never forget honorary Bruin. James Haggs, but but you at least have, I think you're in a better spot there, both in the short term and you hope the long term. But you have guys that could step into those roles at wing. Maybe that's the next thing this team has to look at, in terms of the draft or what have you. Where as opposed to we all knew the Bruins were going to look down the middle, most likely with their first round pick they regained with the Ullmark trade. But if they have their first this year and there's a guy that's putting up numbers, having 40, 50 goals in the WHL or someone like that, maybe that's what they look at as a pure kind of scoring winger as kind of their next kind of need through the draft. Because it does feel like that has to be something that has to be addressed. Of just, you're not going to get a slam dunk, guy if you're picking like in the 20s or wherever they end up picking, but you got to give yourself options. And I think that's probably the next thing you're looking at for the Bruins is probably it's a little bit more skill on the wing, I think, moving forward.
Yeah. I'm going to throw the basketball directly at your face as you're eating popcorn with this next question.
Yeah.
I'm
ready for it now, so I won't be able to stop it, but I'll leave it like
hands up.
Yeah, exactly. The Orville Redenbach is not going 20 rows behind me.
Yeah, so. The popcorn's down beneath you.
Yes.
Let's say the Bruins around the deadline are comfortably outside of the playoff picture, which they shouldn't be, by the way. Like that, this probably won't happen. But in the event that they were, and Marchand was not yet locked up on a contract, and a team comes to you offering like a first round pick or something for Marchand, would you say yes?
I mean, does Marchand have trade protection? Because I feel like he wouldn't.
I would have to
happen.
Look.
Yeah,
that's my thing. And here's the other thing. And here's the other thing with that, right? He's your captain. He's that bridge to the culture that Chara and Bergeron built so well. And I that's a guy who retires a Bruin. Like, and I think this organization would not trade Brad Marchand. That's the other part of it.
Yeah, it would be jarring if this team was outside of the playoff picture. But I also think when you look at how many guys they have signed that are here in their primes or around that, right, between McAvoy and Swayman and Elias Lindholm and all these players, like, even if shit hits the fan this year, I could fully see the Bruins being like, oh, this is a really bad blip, but we're not blowing it up like the Rangers a few years ago. Like, we'll make some tweaks, obviously, whether that's coaching or tweaks to the roster, but I don't think they'd, do a full fire sale or something like that. I just think this team is too invested in what this current group is that, if things do go awry, I don't see them all of a sudden jettisoning kind of the plan they've kind of put in place in this kind of post-Bergeron era.
Yeah, according to Spot Track, modified no trade clause from 22 to 24. So that's what that is, and that's what that is. Yeah, I agree with you. And now I will play devil's advocate. If you were to deal him, I don't think that would be a full rebuild. I think that's one move. You're bolstering, whether it be a prospect and a first or whatever it is, like sort of retooling on the fly. But again, it would be unlike them to actually do that.
Right.
He's the captain, and that guy should retire a Bruin. Like, I think we all can agree on that. So I like to bring up those hypothetical situations. Keep everybody on their toes. I like to think outside the box. Keep everybody going. Some potential help for the wing. Tyler Johnson still remains unsigned. I feel like for the last week, ever since Riley Tufte got waived, we've sort of been like, all right, when's that Johnson news coming out? Again, I don't think he's the solution to their problems, but I don't think it would hurt to give him a look, to try him, like to kind of be last year's Danton Heinen. Again, it comes down to what he's going to command. I mean, Heinen, I think, made veteran minimum last year, but I think, giving Johnson a shot would not be a bad thing.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, again, if you're expecting him to be the savior, I don't know what to tell you, but he, again, goes back to what we said about like the depth of this team. Like, it gives you options, and like with especially a guy like Morgan Geekie really struggling right now, bring in a guy like Tyler Johnson to both kind of put a fire under him and give him time to sit as well, I think can only help your team. Like, again, he scored 17 goals with an admittedly really bad Chicago team last year, but the playmaking, the veteran savvy is still there. We saw it during preseason play. So if and when he signs a contract, would you imagine that's going to be all but inevitable? I think when Heinen signed, it was October 30th, and it was like an hour before. Like a game. So maybe that's the same thing where Johnson will sign probably for the Flyers and he's in the lineup. But again, gives you more, I think, playmaking skill. Like, even if he's not what he was with Tampa, having a more of a guy that is a proven playmaker, can hang around the net, can only help this team. Again, it gives you more. It's not calling up a Tufte or a guy that's probably better suited for like a fourth line or a very kind of like north-south third line kind of role. Like, Johnson can at least give you something there, I think, in one of those roles, and see what you can get out of him.
Top 6 fill-in, bottom 6 regular. I think you can get along with that for sure. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe?
Yeah, we'll have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season, whether it's recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that stuff. And you can read all of it over at the Boston Globe and Boston.com. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.